Have you ever sat in a pew or a sanctuary or, simply across from your own family and felt that quiet, heavy devastation of being told your love wasn't blessed? That somehow it was outside the covenant, insufficient, or just plain wrong? Maybe because of your background, your religion, or simply the person you decided to give your heart to? If you have, I just want you to take a deep breath right now. Because today, we're looking at something incredibly profound. As the great 13th century mystic Rumi once wrote, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there." Well, we are going to that field today.
Welcome to this explainer, created specifically right here for the Perennial Truth channel. Today, we're unpacking a really stunning body of work called Sacred Union, the truth about marriage, love, and the divine. Our goal? We're going to dive deep into this source material to completely dismantle the institutional gatekeeping around love. We're definitely not doing the sanitized Sunday school versions of history today. We're going straight back to the raw, ancient texts to reveal what the divine actually requires of two souls who happen to find each other in this world.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a fantastic roadmap for our journey today. We'll start with the human construct, move into ancient texts on love, look at the biblical patriarch reality, explore inventing the medieval rules, and finish up with the perennial truth. All right, kicking things off with part 1. The human construct, what Genesis actually says, and honestly, what it doesn't say. Now think about divine commandments for a second. They're usually super clear, right? Like, thou shalt not kill. Pretty straightforward. But the strict modern rules of marriage, they're actually missing. You might immediately think of Genesis 2:24, which says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." But here's the absolute crucial point. That word therefore is just a narrator's commentary. It's the biblical author drawing a cultural conclusion about Adam and Eve, not God prescribing some strict legal or religious ceremony. There is no priest mentioned here, no vows, no rings. In fact, get this, biblical Hebrew doesn't even have a word for a wedding ceremony. None. It's literally just two people, one flesh, physically and spiritually uniting.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive contrast between what we've been taught and what historically happened. On one hand, you have the narrative we all grew up with, a divine mandate that absolutely requires ecclesiastical approval. But then, look at the ancient reality of marriage in the Near East. We're talking about things documented in the Code of Hammurabi. It was essentially a property contract. It was all about bride prices, dowries, inheritance law, and keeping the tribe together. It wasn't sacred theology at all. It was ancient real estate and family law for human beings.
Moving right along to part 2, ancient texts on love. Let's look at what the world's oldest civilizations actually knew about all this. So if the whole legal framework of marriage wasn't inherently spiritual from the get-go, where does the sacred part actually come in? Well, we have to look past the legal critiques and see how ancient peoples actually recorded human union. Over 1,000 years before the Torah was even compiled, we're talking around 2100 BCE, the Sumerians were writing about hieros gamos, or the sacred marriage. This was the union between the goddess Inanna and the shepherd king Dumuzi. And notice what's totally missing here? Zero priests, zero laws, no tribal requirements. It was entirely about freely chosen, mutual desire, and spiritual integration. It was about cosmic abundance, not legal governance.
And we see this echoed everywhere across early human history. The ancient Egyptians understood love through ma'at, this beautiful idea of divine cosmic order and inner spiritual recognition that defied even death. The Gnostic texts talk about the bridal chamber, a mystical reunion of the soul with its divine counterpart that had absolutely nothing to do with institutions. And, right in the middle of the Bible itself, we have the Song of Solomon. It is unambiguous, gorgeous love poetry rooted in completely unchained mutual desire. No institutional permission is ever asked for and none is required. Love itself is the transformative spiritual vehicle.
Which brings us to part 3, the biblical patriarch reality, the families God actually blessed.
Okay, to really understand the strict rules we're taught today, we need a serious reality check. If lifelong, exclusive monogamy was the strict, uncompromising divine mandate, you'd think God's chosen leaders would follow it perfectly, right? But consider this. Abraham had 2 simultaneous partners, Sarah and Hagar, and God blessed both lineages. Jacob had 4 wives and birthed the 12 tribes of Israel from them. David had multiple wives and was still famously called a man after God's own heart. And Moses? Moses had an interracial, interfaith marriage to Zipporah the Midianite, and when his own siblings criticized him for it, God explicitly defended Moses. God never condemned these messy, diverse structures. Actually, scratch that. God didn't just not condemn them. The divine worked directly through them.
So how do we get from there to here? Part 4, inventing the medieval rules.
and how Greek Stoicism completely hijacked theology.
I mean, if the messy, plural reality of the patriarchs was totally accepted by the divine, how on earth did we end up with today's incredibly strict sacraments? Let's actually trace this timeline, because it's kind of wild. Back in 55 CE, Paul the Apostle writes about marriage, but he explicitly calls it a practical concession, not a command. He actually preferred people stay single because, well, he thought the world was ending any minute. It isn't until the year 1184 CE at the Council of Verona that marriage is finally formalized as a Catholic sacrament, and it wasn't until 1563 CE at the Council of Trent that the Church officially mandated a priest, 2 witnesses, and church registration. The strict architecture of holy matrimony as this huge legal, religious hurdle, it's literally a late medieval invention designed to consolidate institutional power.
So how exactly did that massive shift happen? Look at how the early teachings contrast with medieval theology. Early Christians viewed marriage as totally pragmatic, but later figures like Augustine of Hippo, who was heavily influenced by Greek Stoicism, which basically viewed the spirit as good and the physical body as bad, started layering these heavy ideas of original sin onto human sexuality. Later on, Thomas Aquinas locked in this highly institutional, procreation-focused model. Marriage morphed from a practical, beautiful human bond into a mechanism for damage limitation and property control, tightly governed by the Church.
All right, let's ascend a bit here for Part 5, the perennial truth, what the true divine actually says about love.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it cuts right through all that medieval bureaucracy. We just have to look at the theology itself. Let's systematically walk through the devastatingly simple logic of 1 John chapter 4. The text literally says, "Whoever loves has been born of God." The logical conclusion? The criterion is love itself. Not your denomination, not your matching membership card, just love. Next verse. "Anyone who does not love does not know God because God is love." Think about that. If God is literally love itself, then genuine love is the literal presence of God. Finally, if we love one another, God abides in us. You guys, you cannot logically believe that God is love while simultaneously gatekeeping who is allowed to love. Love requires no external validation because it is inherently already holy.
And I absolutely have to share this gorgeous passage from the Gospel of Thomas. "Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there." The divine permeates absolutely all things without exception. And if the divine is in the wood and in the stone, it for sure permeates the person that some institution told you not to love.
And you know, this isn't just some isolated rogue idea. From Safad to Konya, every deep mystic tradition completely agrees on this perennial truth. In Kabbalah, we see Divakut, souls helping each other cleave back to the infinite divine source. In Hindu theology, the image of Ardhanarishwara shows divine wholeness requiring complementary energies. In Sufi mysticism, with folks like Rumi, human love is literally the training ground to perceive God in the beloved. And in indigenous traditions like the Lakota Mitakuyo Yasin, we see a sacred, interconnected web of all beings. Cross-culturally, the purpose of love is mutual spiritual transformation.
So, here is the crucial takeaway. Sacred partnership is measured by mutual elevation, not institutional duration. In the Kabbalistic concept of tikkun, or repair, true union is about 2 souls acting as a vehicle back to the source. A 40-year marriage where 2 people diminish each other is absolutely not more sacred than a shorter relationship where 2 people genuinely help each other grow toward the light. The institution, it measures legal duration and a piece of paper. But the divine measures transformation.
I want you to really sit with this for a second. Just look at your own life. If the divine is already present in your genuine love, whose permission are you still waiting for? Why do you need an institution to validate the incredible transformation that is already happening in your own heart?
We've looked at the ancient texts, we've traced the real history, and we've uncovered the perennial truth. The paperwork and the tribal boundaries, all of that came way later. Love is the nature of the true divine, and no institution can ever sanctify what is already holy. So as you walk forward from this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. If your love is already a vehicle for the divine, what beautiful things could you build if you finally stopped asking for permission?